I think now, like I said, having a toddler that's just absorbing everything that you say and do is really like that's a good kind of like policing for me, because I said, can I say it? I said, damn it, the other day. And he goes, damn it. So I was like, great. Yeah. So
at least you could have said a lot worse.
Oh, yeah.
We've heard a lot worse in our house.
Yeah.
Welcome to The Defense Never Rests with Morgan and Akins, your monthly dose of uncommon sense about all things legal and some that are not.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Defense Never Rests. I am your host, Trisha Baxter, and today we are talking about, I hate to say it, work-life balance. I mean, isn't that the phrase everyone uses? It's so much a fallacy, but it's something that we need to talk about. And it's really, how do you manage a professional career and a family together? So today, joining me for a second time is co-host Megan Henry. Hey, Megan.
Good morning.
How are you?
Great. How are you?
I saw your daughter on the bus today. We live in the same neighborhood, and I was going to wave to her. I'm like, no, I'd probably embarrass her. So I decided not to do that. But we talked last time. You have two young kids, so you have the same challenges that our guests do today. So I figure great for you to be on and help me ask some questions. So without further ado, our two guests, I'll introduce first. She is a relatively new mother in the trenches, a son who is 2 years in May, and has been in the professional world for, God, I think you're younger than me, like maybe 15, 20 years. Am I dating
so
you?
Kind.
Well, without further ado, she works for the Graham Company. She is the senior claims consultant, Kara White. Hey, Kara.
Hello, I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm so excited that you're here.
I'm excited to be here.
So
Thank
I'm
you.
interested to get your perspective, because my daughter's 7, so I've kind of already gone through what you've gone through, and you forget. As you get further out, you forget. So I'm excited to talk to you.
Yes.
And then the second guest, who, God bless him, I pulled him on this morning to come on the podcast because I wanted a male point of view. This is not just a female issue or a mom issue. This is a dad issue too. He is our newly appointed insurance coverage leader, and he has been practicing for about 20 years. Scott Ribney. Hey, Scott.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
So happy you were like so gung-ho. You're like, sure, I'll come on. Like,
Absolutely.
Great. It is very courageous of you to come on with no prep, no warning. I was just like, come on. So let's start. Kara, I'll throw this to you. Walk me through your professional legal journey.
Okay.
And however long you want to talk about it.
Yeah. So even it kind of ties into it. But so I started out as a registered nurse, and then I went on to law school, practiced insurance defense litigation with a focus in medical malpractice and long-term care for over 10 years. And then I made the move to the Graham Company, which is an insurance broker. And there, as a claims consultant, I kind of parlay both the legal background and, insurance knowledge into assisting our clients. So I've been there for about, I guess it's over 6 years now. So, yeah.
And that's where you started a family, right? I mean,
yes.
at the Graham Company.
At the Graham Company, yeah.
So your perspective is interesting, because you'll have the single life versus the married children life.
The non-single life, yes.
What about Scott? What about you? Tell us about your journey.
Well, I've kind of come about full circle. I've been an attorney for 20 years, started downtown here in Philadelphia. You and I practiced for a little while together.
That's right.
Doing the coverage work pretty much my entire career. Got married to a first grade teacher, moved my practice out of the city, joined some county firms, thinking that was going to be more conducive for the family, the work-life balance we were hoping to have. Turned out county life wasn't so different than a lot of traditional, stereotypical center city firms. So here I am back down in Philadelphia, reunited with you. 3 kids later, a 12-year-old daughter, a 10-year-old son, and a 4-year-old daughter, and having a blast all along the way.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love it. Let's start with, take me through what your day looks like. I'll throw this to you, Kara.
Okay.
Give me a day in the life of Kara White.
Okay. So alarm goes off at like 5. Maybe I hit snooze a few times. Get up, coffee, definitely. First things first, coffee, a little bit of news on my phone and things like that. And then I basically try to get my son's stuff ready, his lunch for daycare. Then I, try to get some of my stuff ready, shower. I try to do all this at warp speed before he wakes up, because then all bets are off. And then, taking care of him in the morning, and it's getting increasingly more difficult because he's like, nearing the 2. I was telling Trish, like he's, nearing the age of 2, and he's got a lot of opinions and how things need to go. And,
And telling you those opinions.
the routines are getting longer and longer of what we need to do. So it's not like when he was an infant and basically just like, a loaf of bread that I had to get dressed and put in a car seat.
Yeah.
So
now he actually cares what he wears.
yeah. And so, but at the end of the day, I have to be out the door by 7:30 in order to catch a train to be down here. So my commute is about an hour and a half door to door.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, that's basically it. My husband and I kind of take turns who does daycare drop off. I do have the flexibility that I work from home a few days a week, which is nice. So,
And then what about the end of your day?
End of
Let's
the
fast
day.
forward through that 8 hours of day. And then you leave.
Fast forward through work, and here it is. I have to be walking out at 5 o'clock to catch a 5:11 train, which gets me home at about 6:30. And those are the days that my husband would have done pickup and has gotten, my son's dinner started already. And so, try to just spend as much time with my son before he kind of flames out, before bath and bedtime. He usually goes down at about 7:30, and then I, do all the cleaning up. I'll eat, we'll eat ourselves, and then I try to get some of the stuff started for the next morning. And I'm usually in bed by 9:30 because I just can't.
I'm with you.
I can't really stay up. I do like to try to work in downtime. Like my goal is to be sitting down by like 8:30 on the couch and just watching mindless TV. So that's kind of how I decompress.
Well, I think it's important to have a little bit of that during your day. Otherwise, you're just going, and then you completely lose any iota of sense for any time for yourself, even if it's watching some Real Housewives
That's
show.
That's exactly what it is, Megan.
Guilty pleasure.
Yes.
Real Housewives. I'm sure Scott's not in that.
Or The Bachelor, anything.
Yes.
Well, let me take a real quick sidetrack to that. So I'm sitting here waiting for jury duty the other day and filling out the questionnaire. And one of the last questions on there is, what is your favorite TV show? And I had a complete blank. I said, when was the last time I actually sat down and A, watched a show I wanted, and B, actually got into it for a while, because the kids monopolize the TV the whole time. So it's like, what am I going to put down there in terms of the show? I'm like, all right, if I put down something my 4-year-old watches, it might go one of 2 different ways. It might get me on, or it might get me out, or...
Well, what about your day? What does your day, an average day in the life of Scott look like?
My day starts around the same time as yours, maybe a little earlier, because my 12-year-old, her bus picks her up about 6:40 in the morning. So usually I'm up by about 5, a little before 5, so she can get into the shower at about 5:20, and then my wife usually gets in afterwards. The 4-year-old is usually up somewhere around that 5:30 hours, so it's literally wake up, shower, everything's moving, and I'm going to throw the one caveat in, like, that's the fall and the winter, because in place of TV, I like to run, do marathons, do triathlons. So come spring and summer, then my day backs up by about half an hour to about 4:30 in the morning.
Oh my God, it's crazy.
To get everybody out the door, my youngest at daycare. So I feel your pain there. And then make sure everybody's lunches are ready, dressed outdoor, the homework is done. All while starting this process in the beginning of it, because a lot of the clients I deal with, their days start by 7:30 in the morning, and I know that if I want to get in touch with them, that's usually going to be the best time for me to be able to reach everybody before their phone is ringing off the hook, and I can actually have like a really productive conversation. And then, when I'm down in here, it's driving into Philadelphia, because I don't have as much patience as you for waiting for that same train at the end of the day. And
I definitely don't have patience.
I've done more than my fair share of either running for the train or missing the train, and then you have to wait another hour for the next one to get out there. And I don't want to miss that time with the kids at the end of the day, in part because they've got to be running 8 different directions between all of their different activities, and then just to be able to have some semblance of downtime with the family.
So that's one of the questions that I wanted to talk to you about, is how you handle that commute. Because how long is your commute?
It's the same length of time. If I take a train, it's about an hour and a half, hour and 40 minutes. If I drive, it's probably about an hour and 10.
Yeah, and like Megan and I live in New Jersey, and it's only 18 miles, but it can take an hour and a half depending on the traffic. So I drive too, but how do I make that drive productive? Because it's for train, I imagine, do you make it productive or do you use it as downtime?
Both,
Yeah.
honestly, and it sort of depends. But a lot of times in the morning, I'll try to make it productive, get a jump on people that have emailed, the evening before. I do a quick glance at email at night as well, but I try not to really engage because then I can't shut my mind off. Right. So I'll try to, just get a jump on emails. But there are times that I definitely am like ordering groceries online to be delivered or, whatever.
But that's all productive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not unproductive time.
Yeah. And I might try to work a little bit on the way home on the train as well, but usually by then I'm sort of, kind of transitioning out of the workday and sort of getting, in the headspace to do the home stuff, the job number 2, when you get home. So
I'm with you. On the train in the morning, I'm more productive. And then the afternoon, I call it my Candy Crush time. Even though I'm not playing Candy Crush, I kind of use it as my, I'm going to go home and there's going to be a whole whirlwind of activity that I'm going to have to deal with. So let me just calm down for 30 minutes before I get there and have to deal with the next section of chaos.
And what I started doing, actually, I used to take the train all the way. I live up in near like Lawrenceville area. So I used to take the train all the way, but I now drive down to Cornwalls Heights off 95. So I have about like a 40 minute drive to like a 40 minute train. And the reason I did that is because, once my son got into daycare, I was nervous about, if I had to leave here quickly, I know I can get an Uber to my car, as opposed to, I'm not sure Uber drivers would want to go like, all the way, up that far into New Jersey. So I started doing that. And it does break it up a little bit. But it also prevents me from having like that nice hour and a half to like open a laptop and actually do some meaningful stuff. So most of the work I do is basically on my phone.
Yeah.
How is your, you and I work for the same company, so this is kind of an odd question to ask you, but how does your company handle, you mentioned working from home. Are they, I assume they're supportive. How did you make that happen?
So I don't even remember how it happened initially, but it started with one day and then it went to 2 after I had my son. But they were great about it. And I think, they understand that the commute is long. And I think it just kind of came up naturally. My supervisor is extremely supportive. And I think she understands also the need for work-life balance, and the company in and of itself understands the need to keep their employees happy because they invest a lot in us to get us there. But I have a home office, I have dual monitors, and I treat it as if like I am in an office setting. Now, would I go out and like do a load of laundry? Of course. But for the most part, I'm going into the home office in the morning, oftentimes a lot earlier than I would get into the office here, and just really treating it as if I'm in an isolated space. So I'm not one of those people that can do work, in front of the TV or anything like that. So I have a desk and 2 monitors and, a phone, a landline. I can't believe.
You have a landline?
Oh, I do. I know. I'm very, very official. Yeah.
Well, so that's the thing for me that has, I think, saved my sanity with managing family and a business and a practice, is the ability to work from home. Not everybody has that ability, especially in the legal profession and the claims profession. A lot of the Graham company has for years been one of the best companies to work for because they're very family oriented. A lot of people don't have that.
Right.
For me, it's saved my sanity. Being in the car every day like that it's a waste of time for me. I put my daughter on the bus. I love that I have the ability and flexibility that I put my daughter on the bus almost every day. And I try to pick her up from the bus. So, if I work from home, then I do that. And I will chat with her about her day for half an hour, and then I go back into my office and do work. But if you have any advice for people that work for companies that are not that friendly, how they could work from home, either one of you, what would you do? What would you tell those people?
I think, you need to demonstrate your ability, that you're focused and you're a hard worker, and that you can do the job regardless of, where you're doing it. So I think that's a big piece of it. So, I think being accessible and available, as much as it might pain me to say it, after hours, so people know that you're not just, I'm cutting it off at 5 o'clock and you're not going to hear from me again until 9 the next day. So, I think just building that trust, and, I think a lot more companies are flexible, but I do feel for the people that don't have that flexibility. I really don't know how they do it. I think it would be very exhausting and stressful. So
have you ever thought about how, when you were in the private practice, the billable hour world, how you would have handled your life now? Have you ever thought about that?
yes, as a matter of fact. I mean, of course, I did a lot of thinking about it when I knew that this was the podcast, that we were discussing. 'Cause I'm not sure how I would have done it, quite honestly. Now, I do think I would have had to have just become more efficient. I do think, looking back when I was younger and practicing attorney, and it was just me looking out for myself, that I probably did, in retrospect, waste a lot of time. And I really probably could have been a lot more efficient. But I think if I'm still a billing entity, but
Do you still do bill?
yeah, I do.
I didn't know
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But the litigation, and the part of it, and being on trial and stuff. I think you have to have a really strong support system. You have to have a village, and just the day-to-day billing hours. I think you have to do what you guys do. I think you have to sort of multitask. I think you have to, be taking calls in the car. I think you have to probably dedicate some time after kids go to bed to just do a little sweep of the email and see if there's something that, the low-hanging fruit that you can knock out, So I think that's probably what I would have had to have done.
Yeah.
Can I just jump in here real quick? Because at a couple other firms, I actually had this discussion with some folks because they were so against the idea of people working remotely.
Right.
And it really came down to, I think, three things ultimately at the end of the day. Number one, some people, even the lawyers, were steadfast in their belief that the law doesn't allow them to have employees work remotely. So I actually took the time to look into it, all the different issues that could go on. I said, no, yes, it does. You can. The other problem, and I think this is really gets to the heart and maybe even some problems within the individual businesses, is there was a lack of trust with the employees.
That's so true.
If they're not in the office and where they can be seen, they're goofing off and they're not going to be doing the work. Well, my response to that is, if you don't have that kind of faith in your employees, then you probably have the wrong employees.
Right.
Or maybe you need to do a little more self-inflection on yourself to say, what kind of leader or manager are you? Because honestly, I've at a bunch of different places, seeing people who are in the office for 8, 9, 10, 12, 14, 16 hours a day, they're productive at most 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
And the rest of it is just wasted time being here.
Yeah.
So that they're not really utilizing the resources to the best of their ability. And then the last part, and you hear me talk about this all the time, it's the technology component of it. To be able to have the ability to work remotely, whether it's on a phone, on an app, on a desktop, from anywhere in the world, has really changed a lot of the way that we do business. I mean, you talk about, what do we do with the commute in the morning? I may line up on just a little scrap piece of paper. Yes, I still use some of those. A bunch of things I need to dictate. Yeah. But then I'll turn around and I'll dictate it right through my phone, because my phone's hooked to my car. So I could just hit this and say, open this app, and then start dictating. So my hands are on the wheel. My eyes are straight ahead. But I can just go forward and I can get, a dozen emails done over the course of a commute. And then it's easy when I get to the office or wherever I'm going to just proofread them really quick. And again, the software is so good nowadays that it's not like it used to be, where you might have to go and rewrite an entire thing. It may take you, less than 3 minutes to go and do.
And I feel like that's changed only in
yeah.
the past few years, because
Yes.
I left the practice of law 6 years ago, and that technology was just emerging.
Yeah.
I mean, I was still going and getting a paper file, dictating through a dictaphone. I mean, it's made leaps and bounds, I think.
Yeah. And I feel like I say this all the time, but when I work from home, I feel like I'm much more efficient and productive than when I'm in the office. When I come to the office, I'm like, well, I haven't seen you people in a few days, so I need to catch up, see what's going on. And I talk more. When I'm at home, the only person I have to talk to is myself, or anyone who calls me on the phone. So I get so much more done, and you're able to maximize your entire day. Even if you're throwing in laundry or picking up some things, I'm usually doing that while I'm on a call, and they might hear clanking in the background, but whatever it may be, I'm 10 times more productive. And I think early on in my career, I didn't really have that work from home option. So what I ended up doing is just sneaking it in and not telling anybody, and no one knew where I was.
Under the radar. Yeah.
No one asked, because you're always out of the office going to court and doing this. So I just started pushing in one day a week that I'd be home, and as long as I was getting my work done, no one raised an eyebrow, no one knew where I was, and I just eventually expanded it, and now like I'm home probably 4 days a week.
Oh, wow.
And I get a
That's
lot more
great.
done.
Yeah, I would say I think the attorneys in our office that work from home consistently, like the 4 days a week, they crush it. Like, and so it's I have been told in my career at other firms like you, Scott, this is not a work from home profession. I'm like, yes, it is. And actually, it's probably one of the best kinds that you can work from home, especially with technology. So, what do you guys? How do you handle sick days when your kid is sick?
Cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you get that call from daycare and you're like, no,
Yeah, I live
please
in
just be calling
fear.
that they fell and hit their head.
See, here's the big wild card with that. It's what does your spouse do? You know, how much flexibility does your spouse have? Like, as a teacher, my wife only gets X number of days per year.
That's me too. We're both married to teachers.
Yeah, so
okay.
and at least in our house, we try to keep those for, okay, the doctor's appointments, or like when something really bad hits, or if I know I've got to be on a trial and I say, okay, I can't rearrange things for that. Otherwise, typically in our house, it's whoever touched the sick child first. You're stuck with them until that child's better.
I like that rule.
You guys
It's
are
like
quarantined.
It's like
That's
tossing
it.
a hot
We've
potato.
literally got like the quarantine room, so to speak, where it's okay, I'll be in there, or my wife will be in there with the TV and whatnot, and they're away from everybody else. But with 3 kids, something like the stomach bug hits, you don't want that running through the rest of the place.
Yeah.
What about you? How do you handle sick days?
Yeah, I mean, so my husband's an attorney in a corporate setting, so he has some flexibility. But you know, it's funny because in the beginning, when we both weren't used to this, it was sort of like, you know, the discussion of like whose job's more important today. But you know, we sort of just kind of take turns. I mean, honestly, but you know, it depends on what's on our calendars on any given day. You know, and I do have the ability to, you know, make a phone call and say, I'm sorry, I have to work from home today as opposed to tomorrow because you know I have to stay home. I do try to be really judicious, though, about, you know, using my sick time. We have a generous benefits package. And so, you know, I'm honest. I mean, if I really only get 4 hours of work done, I'm taking a half day PTO. Like, I'm not abusing it because, you know, I just feel that it's important to maintain that integrity of the process, too, and not just like, quote unquote, work from home. No, if I'm really only getting half a day in or not a day in, I will take it off. You know, because I just, you know, I firmly believe that that's a big part of like building the trust too.
Yeah, you maintain that trust so
Yeah.
when something really does hit the fan, they believe you when
Right.
you have whatever happened.
Right.
So let's talk about activities. I know Jack's not into activities yet. He's not even 2. But how about you guys? How do you handle activities? Room parents or sports? Or...
Well, you have a lot of activities for your kids.
Oh my gosh.
Your kids are all over the place.
We're going 6 days a week with activities, you know, right? And during a sports season, there's something going on every day of the week. But, you know, as I tell everybody, it's the best time.
Yeah.
You know, I would never miss one of my kids' events. And growing up, you know, I had a father who worked 6 days a week. You know, he would go into the office on Saturday mornings, but he always made every one of the things that I had. And I say, you know what, that's the things I remember most. And I always want my kids to be remembering that as well. But it all comes down to really how organized are you? And then how flexible can you be?
Yeah.
You know, one of the things, you know, so many attorneys like to trumpet themselves on is, oh, you know, you can switch on the fly, whether it's in a courtroom or in a deposition, a trial, what have you. Well, life's the same way, you know, it's, you know, you could get a call, okay, you know, this, you know, my daughter now has a practice this Friday that wasn't scheduled beforehand. Okay, so now we've got to make some adjustments. Okay, who's going to get her out to that practice, which isn't anywhere near where our house is? You know, my wife's leaving on Saturday to go with my son to a competition in another state, and then my daughter's got, you know, a tournament on Saturday. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's that type of thing. And then during the week, it's really, you'll learn how good of a marriage you have when you have to balance a lot of that.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I feel like in my house, my oldest daughter's 7, so she's just getting into the activity portion, and the younger one's 5, so she's not quite there yet. So activities are still kind of a family affair. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to try my best to have them in similar activities.
It won't work. They'll be on different days, I promise you.
I know. So right now we don't have the activities split that you have. I'm sure that's to come, but right now we can still kind of manage, okay, we're all going on Saturday morning, and I have them both in the same thing. And during the week, it tends to fall on me because I have the flexible schedule and I'm working from home more frequently. I'm able to take my older daughter to tennis lessons or whatever other thing she has going on. But during the week, it falls on me mostly.
Yeah, and I think I have to say we're all very fortunate to have what seems to have a supportive spouse. I was raised by a single mom who couldn't make it to a lot of the activities because we counted on her single salary. So I would, in the 80s, I would walk to my activities by myself. Like, who does that anymore?
Definitely not allowed.
It's so true. Like when, I feel like I grew up in the dark ages because of that. It's like, well, I walked to everything and, it wasn't, my parents really didn't have the ability to be at every single activity too. And activities were really centralized.
Yeah.
And you did one, maybe two. You weren't doing like 5 or 10 or.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel for single parents out there that
too.
maybe want to be part of the activities, but they can't. We're very fortunate to have, spouses. And I think that kind of run through a lot of what we talked about already is one of the things I want to talk to you about is how supportive is the spouse, right? I mean, married to teachers, they get off at 3 o'clock. Like my husband gets home by 3 o'clock, which is beautiful. I don't know what I would do if I had him coming home at 6, which I think that's when, your husband gets home or maybe even later. How do you have these conversations with your spouse? How does that work for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, so my husband actually works from home 1 day a week. So between the two of us, there's 3 days a week at home, which is good because that kind of covers pickup and drop off and things like that. So that just naturally fell into place. I typically do most of the, cooking, cleaning up, although he will pitch in and he typically does most of the take out the garbage and things like that. And I hate to say it, but we've just fallen into those gender roles. But he really, he's really hands-on as a father and has absolutely no problem, diapers, baths, anything like that. So it really works out well.
That's great.
Yeah. And I mean, it just, I knew that about him. Because he has an older child. So I knew that about him going in. And it really has just, it's been great because I don't know how people that have to kind of do all of it do it all.
And that's what's great about you and I. So we're both stepmoms and we got a preview into our husband's dad skills before we signed up for marriage. How about you, Scott? How do you guys balance that?
I'm very fortunate because my oldest is awesome. At 12 years old, she will step up and do whatever we need her to do.
So you actually have a third. Yeah.
I really do have a third set of hands there, just not behind the wheel of a car yet. But in terms of everything else that
what does that have
going in Pennsylvania in 3 years.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, I mean it does help out a lot, and a lot of it is really just flipping off on the fly. Okay, if my wife's had a rough day, then it's like, okay, I'll take the youngest up, get her in for a tub there, and then everybody else, it's like, you do this, you do that, okay, boom, 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 and it's done. It's not like a military household. I don't want to give that impression, but everybody kind of knows what they're supposed to be doing now because they see us all the time going and just kind of very organized and regimented. I mean, I feel bad for people, and I don't know how they do it, who don't know what day of the week it is and what's going on, because to me, that's the type of thing that would stress me out. The amount of activities doesn't, but we work very hard to try and get the kids into a schedule and say, okay, when you have to do this. My son's got practice 3 days a week for his sport. He's got maybe a half hour between when he comes home and when he's got to be running out for it. So it's like, okay, if I'm not around, it's like, here's something that's already cooked. You can go reheat. So he knows, come home, change, eat. Someone will be by to pick him up. My daughter gets home half hour beforehand, so she can help out there. And at least they've got the two of each other to balance out. And my wife gets home half an hour or an hour later than your husband, so it's really into that crazy time period here.
What about local family members? Do you have any in-laws, grandparents, siblings, or anyone that's around to help out with a day by day when, say, you and your husband both have conflicts and you just can't make the pickup?
So my in-laws are about 30 minutes away from us at home. So my mother-in-law is our emergency, pickup contact. So, I mean, I bought her a car seat and, she's the go-to, and they're retired. So, but they love to travel. So it's, I mean, I want
to travel to you or just not travel around.
They love to travel in general. So sometimes you run the risk of them not being available. my brother-in-law also is in the same place that they are. But other than that, we come from big families, but just not a lot of people are right here. And I'm pretty envious. I see people in my neighborhood that are like, oh, my sister lives down the block and my parents are there. I'm like, oh, that must be nice.
Yes, I'm so
people
jealous.
are in walking distance. But yeah, so I mean, we do have the the emergency people in place, but I really am envious of people that have the family members that are really close.
So true. We don't have any, just by the practicality. My mother-in-law is 91 and has MS. She just can't do that.
Right.
And my mom lives in South Carolina, and we just don't have that family support. So it's tough. I see people are like, oh, I'm going to call my mom or my mother-in-law or my brothers and sisters for babysitting. I'm like, oh, I would love to have that. That's tough.
The only thing that bothers me a little bit about, the people who do that, and let me caveat with this, we have both sets of parents relatively close by, like within a 20-minute drive. Faster if it's an emergency, they can get there, at least I know on my side, but we don't abuse it. It's okay. Right. If we're completely attached with something or something really big came up or someone is sick and neither one of us can take off, then we'll call in the troops, so to speak. But I'll hear people at my kids' different events where it's like, oh, yeah, I wanted to go out and go shopping today. So I called my in-laws to come and watch my son or daughter, and then I spent like 3 or 4 hours at the mall. I'm like, it's great if you want to have that time with them, but I feel so guilty about that because I know just with our professions, there are times where it's like, I can't be there. I'm on a trial that's starting, in Western Pennsylvania or in New York or New Jersey or someplace else, and my wife has things that she just can't move, so it's like, okay, now I'm picking up the bat phone and it's lighting on somebody's other end here so they can come out and help out. But I tip my hat for the people like you, Trish, who do it, who don't have that support network, like at your fingertips at disposal. You got to line something else up because it's tough.
Yeah. It makes travels really tough for us. Summertime is great. Tom's off. My husband's off. But if we have travel and if I travel during the school year, we have to talk about it for weeks in advance.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
To get that situated. Well, let's shift to work stress. I mean, what we do is on a day-to-day basis is stressful. How do you guys manage that well? That's my biggest struggle is leaving the stress of what happened that day at work. I get home and I want to be present for my daughter. I struggle with that. How do you guys have this down pat? Can you teach me or something?
Not at all. No, because it's been a real big mindset shift for me. I try so hard to be present because, I don't want to be that person that has their face buried in their phone and trying to multitask when part of the quote unquote task is being with my son, but I did it that way for so long and had my son later in life that really old habits die hard. Yeah. But I really try to just put the phone down and really just kind of make myself understand that things can wait. And I was joking with you, showing you a video of my son on the phone, and I was like, I hope he's not learning that from me on his toy cell phone, sashaying around the kitchen.
He had the toy phone up to his ear, walking around like he was like a 50-year-old man.
Right.
He's not even 2.
Right.
So funny.
And so, that kind of stuff is eye-opening, and I try to really keep that in mind that, they see everything and hear everything. So I really try to just be present when I'm home.
How do you handle it?
See, I find the harder part, because we set aside time where it's like, okay, work is done. Like when we're there for dinner, we always have dinners together as a family, minus like the couple days where my son is like practicing till 9 o'clock at night. But every other day of the week, it's like, okay, we're there. There's like that 2-hour block where there's nothing being done. I'm not on my phone. My wife's not checking work email. Occasionally, if something comes up, okay, I know at dinner I'm going to be expecting a call from someone. I may say, all right, I'm going to have to step out for a few minutes. But that's the rarity. The bigger challenge for me is not the checking of the emails. It's how do you leave the stress from work
exactly.
out?
Yeah.
And you had a real hard day. You had a real challenging attorney on the other end who was just hitting all the wrong buttons with you. I don't want to get home and be like that angry parent who's, doesn't want to do anything with the kids. I want to be able to let all of that go. And I joke with my kids. That's why I go to the gym. That's why I work out so much, so I can literally get it all out. And it's really coming home now with a teenage or soon to be teenage daughter who's getting into all of that and now starting to feel like different stress in her life, but real stress, to say, okay, here's what I'm doing. Will you see me disappear into the basement, to ride on the bike or go on the treadmill or do something? I got to get it out. All I need is like 15, 20 minutes and I'm good. And then I can go back, I can join everybody. It's like, okay, now we can go have fun. I can run around with the kids, do all stuff that kids should be doing.
Right. And they see you have a healthy outlet to your stress.
Right.
Yeah, I think I struggle with it. And when I'm like yesterday, I had a really good day. I had an awesome call with a client. I was like one of those like, wow, I really crushed it, right? And I don't get those a lot, but I really felt good about it. And I went home and I was an awesome parent. Like I was in tune. Me and Kaylee were like eye to eye. I loved it. And then there's like days where last week where I have the opposite situation where you're dealing with a very difficult plaintiff's counsel, or maybe you'd be dealing with a difficult insured, somebody who's really not happy with whatever's going on. And it takes a toll. Like I'd love to be the person that has that emotional intelligence to just cut that off. But I get home and I have that angst still in me and I can feel it. So maybe I need to get a bike in the basement or something. I have a treadmill upstairs. But so how do you you work out, right?
I do. I mean, not as much as I'd like to, but I do feel that definitely helps. Honestly, sometimes I just have to bounce things off my husband. I was doing it last night. I didn't want to talk about work at 9:00 at night, but I was like, I just need your opinion on this. So we try not to do that just because, that a lot of times isn't helpful because you just get hijacked in the situation. But there are times I have the benefit of, I try to use the drive or the train, the drive. I mean, you can kind of you could have conversations with yourself and get a lot off your chest then,
Lots of screaming in that car ride.
Yeah, you can do that. But, I try to find outlets so that when I walk through the door, I'm not bringing it through the door with me. I'm not saying I have that perfected by any stretch of the imagination. And I'm sure if you asked my husband, he would tell you that too. So it's a work in progress, definitely. But I think now, like I said, having a toddler that's just absorbing everything that you say and do is really that's a good kind of like policing for me, because I said, can I say it? I said, damn it, the other day. And he goes, damn it. So I was like, great. Yeah. So
at least you could have said a lot worse.
Oh, yeah.
We've heard a lot worse in our house.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, I'm not saying those words don't exist in our house too, but I mean, the idea that he echoed it right back to me, I was like, and here we go. Yeah. So.
How about you? How do you handle the stress?
I do a lot of the exercise, but I really, really try just to turn it off. And I say I can stress out about this at 9:00, but from 5:30 till 9, I have to just, I kind of just put it back here, and then I'll let it creep in later, but I really, really do my best just to push it out. Because I've noticed there's been other times where I have that feeling and then I snap, or I'm really impatient, or I get impatient with something that I wouldn't normally get impatient with. So I do the best I can just to put it in the back of my mind and say, I can't do anything about that right now. So I'm going to deal with that later. It's not always perfect.
Yeah, I got to work on that myself. What about the billable hour? You are still, and that's one metric that you're still involved with, but how do you guys, does that stress you out as far as billable hours and your family? After 20 years, you're like, I got it down.
Ever since I started practicing day one, all I've done is the billable hour. So it's as normal to me as breathing and walking and eating right now. It's just part of my life. It's part of my job. It's what I do. For the new people coming into it, I could see where that would be stressful, because they spend so much time worrying about the time that they're losing more time with it.
Yeah.
What's your practice? Is it you have a certain number that you hit every day? Do you have any habit that you...
I'll be honest, I focus more on the tasks. I worry less about the number and more on the amount of work coming in and the quality of the work going out. Because I find that if you have enough work, and this is what I used to tell young associates all the time when I would be working with them, is when the work is there, the hours flow. If you're doing your job and I'm doing my job to make sure the work is coming in, you don't worry about the hours. You keep track of them, and you'll have whatever number you need and then some by the end of the day. And as long as you recognize, okay, There may be some days where it goes a little lower. There are going to be some days where it's a little higher. But if you try to have self-imposed metrics on yourself and say, okay, you know what? I want to hit this number every month, or I know I've got a vacation I want to take in June or July. It's easier for me to add an extra 10 or 15 hours a month now so that I can take off that time and not have to worry about it.
How do you handle it, Kara?
So, I mean, our requirements aren't, the same as, they were when I was an attorney. So, we still have to capture our time and bill our time, but it's a lot less stringent, I guess, in terms of how you do it. But, hearkening back to my days as an attorney, I think the biggest mistake that I would make is not, just entering the time when I was doing the task, because you leave a lot on the floor if you don't do that. Yeah. So my suggestion to, associates that are starting out, and when I used to mentor associates, I would say, just enter your time, at the same time you're doing it, or try not to, let more than a few days go by without really going back and reconciling it, because you really will not get that time back. And really it's, it's doable. I think, I'm not sure what everyone's hours requirements are these days, but it is doable if you really stay on top of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I first became a parent, I was completely stressed out and overwhelmed about making the time, because I was like, oh my gosh, before I had kids, I was spending so much more time in the office. Mm-hmm. And I think this goes exactly to the efficiency argument, or the efficiency discussion we were having earlier. I was spending so much time in the office and just like scraping by making my hours. And then I was like, what's going to happen? Like, how am I going to be able to do this? And then you find, well, you're just a lot more efficient and you're better about keeping on task. Now, am I perfect about keeping on task of billing for my emails the day they come in? No.
Right, right. No, who is?
But there is a track of those, and I can keep track of them.
Yeah.
See, and it's funny, for me, it was the exact opposite. When we had each one of our kids, and they were the infants, my hours went up, because the way we had it broken out was I would be up with the kids until midnight, 1 o'clock, whenever that last feeding was. Well, all they do is pretty much sleep and eat. So I would have, and there's somewhere there's a picture of my firstborn, like asleep in my arm with a dictaphone, like right on top of my other arm there. But that's it. I would have like a stack of papers on one side, I'd have her on the other, and I would just be dictating for an extra 4 hours. I'd go to sleep at midnight 1. My wife would have from like 1 to, 5 or 6 or whenever, the kids woke up at that point, and then she was on maternity leave. She'd be home during the day, and when she went back to work, we kind of kept the same thing. So at least we were both averaging about 5 hours of sleep a night. So it worked out, but again, it doesn't work for everybody. Everybody does different things. It clicked with our house.
Yeah, I have a picture of you, like your kids falling to sleep to your voice when you're dictating coverage opinions, which, God bless you, I think I'd fall asleep too, right?
It worked with my third until she was about a year. And then when she woke up, I had to start dancing around the floor with her to like some chipmunk bebop music. But that was the only thing that got her to fall asleep. And I thought, God help me when this child gets older, because I already see the road she's traveling down here, and I know how this story's going to end.
Well, I know just a couple last topics. We're going to wrap this up. But, Kara and I had children later in life, right? Yeah. How do you think that, or has that affected your career or being a mom? You ever thought about that?
Yeah, I definitely have. Obviously, I think that I'd like to think that there were some great times and not so great times, like in my 20s and 30s, that, I could bring to, life lessons, for having a child later in life. But from a career perspective, I think I'm lucky in that, I had made the decision to kind of transition out of the law firm and over into the Graham Company. And so, I don't feel like my career has suffered a setback as a result of being a mom. I don't know what the case would have been if I stayed in practicing law. I don't know if it would have, if you had a baby when you were associate, would it have taken longer to make partner? I'm not sure. I do know people that I'm friendly with that are still in the law firm setting that they managed to do it all. So I think that there is definitely a different approach to that these days. But I think I'm lucky in that I sort of, started a different path, which, turned out to be more family friendly. And it just worked out well for me. So
yeah, I'm kind of the same way. Like I was my daughter was 10 months old when I was opening an office and managing it and running it. So I had the time dedicated to my career kind of before I started having children. And I think not that that's easy. I mean, when you're opening office when your daughter's 10 months
Yeah, I
old, that
can't
was
imagine.
hard. But, you know, I had that sweat equity already built in. I don't know if I had had my daughter when I was 32 or 30 or 28, what my career would look like. How has that affected you guys? You guys had kids younger, right?
Well, I started my legal career a little bit later, and then I had kids early in my legal career. And I think when I had my first daughter, I think I was nervous about it and I was stressed about it. And I think I wouldn't say it prevented me from doing anything, but I think it slowed down the progress maybe for a few years, because during that very early stages when they were really young, I wasn't marketing as much because I honestly side-tabled it because I'm like, I need to do this right now, and this is what's important. But after my second daughter was born, I think she was 4 months old, and I was flying. I think this is when I met you. I was flying across the country to a conference in Palm Springs, you know, and she was 4 months old, and I think that's when I started to get things back on track as from a marketing standpoint. So I think there was almost like a little curve to the plan, but it didn't. I don't think it set me off path.
Yeah.
What about you? How do you feel about that?
I mean, we had my first daughter when I was early 30s, and you know, I think late 20s, early 30s, was that a big difference in my mind? Yeah, it was. I mean, I think by that point, I already had a good deal of sweat equity into the profession. I was more mature at that point. Things were a little easier. I still was a baby in terms of the legal profession when you look at people who've been doing it for 50, 60 years. But it was enough where I at least had an appreciation, I think, of, okay, here's what's going to be involved. Here's what's I need to do for my family and things that I want to do better than, you know, my parents who raised me. And they did an awesome job. But, you know, that's one of the things I wanted to try and teach my kids. Okay, it's their job to do better than what we're doing right now. But the people who have children going into law school or right after law school, it comes down to where you're working. Really, that's either going to make it very easy for you, or it's going to make it very challenging. And, you know, I'm sorry, it applies to both men and women nowadays in this profession. Because I'll tell you, when I go to my kids' sporting events, there are as much dads there as there are moms. You know, and it varies based on the day of the week. And we're all doing the same thing. We're watching on the field or on the TV screen, and we're doing work at the same time. So there's not as much chit chat back and forth, you know, as, you know, maybe we were used to growing up, but there's still some of that.
What about your prior firm? Well, I mean, I don't want you to single any prior firms, but did you ever get any pushback? Because you're an involved dad and a partner and with a caseload and clients. Did you ever get pushback from any of your prior employers? Like,
absolutely.
Your wife should be doing that. Maybe they don't say it like that.
But there was definitely a lot of pushback, and, you know, a lot of, okay, you know, we're going to schedule meetings at 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, and you need to be here. And, you know, I had to make a choice at that point of being, you know, with people who I'd been with for a long time, or do I go and make some changes for something that I know would be better for my family? And not knowing what was going to happen with the clients, you know, the reception they would have if I left for those reasons to go someplace else. But at the end of the day, they get it. And I think one of the things we forget about is the people we deal with, most of them work remotely. Most of their employers are so far ahead of where the legal profession is in terms of understanding you need to have that work-life balance. You'll actually be a better person and better at your job if you're removing at least that stress of it. You know, of, okay, you know, I'm feeling bad because I had to drop my son off at daycare or my daughter off at 6:30 to get my other two who are in elementary school to the before care by 7 o'clock or 6:45 so I can make a 7:30 meeting in the morning. For what? You know, it's but they're tough decisions because sometimes, you know, maybe there's a pay cut someone has to take. Maybe you can afford it. Maybe you can't afford it. But the best advice I got right when my wife was pregnant with my first, and I got the same advice from attorneys I liked and the ones who we couldn't sit civilly at a table together, was that the one thing they all regretted, and they had this in common, they're older men, was that they didn't take the time with the families early on. Either their firms wouldn't allow it, their personalities didn't allow it. They wanted to, just make enough money that they wouldn't have to worry about it and be able to support the families. And what they all found was that by focusing so much on the one side, they missed developing that bond with their children the way they saw so many other parents do it. And they came to regret it later in life.
I think that's definitely what our generation has and the younger generation has better than the older ones is the dads are way more involved.
Yeah.
And companies are starting to support that a little bit better.
I mean, I notice it at school drop off or daycare drop off. I mean, it's just as many dads doing it as there are moms doing it, which I think speaks directly to that. I mean, I feel like it's pretty much 50-50 who's doing that.
Well, I'll notice that when I drop my daughter at dance, it's all moms, and when I drop my daughter at basketball, it's all dads. So not always. Well, let me wrap this up with one final kind of thought or question to you, and I'll throw this to you first. What do you think is your biggest struggle personally with managing the work-life balance?
I think my biggest struggle is the travel that comes in with our job sometimes. I think, while and I've talked about this before, like while I do enjoy having to, go away and have a quiet glass of wine without people like my kids talking to me,
Or
asking
a couple
me,
quiet glasses of wine.
it's a family
She didn't say
program.
how big the glass is.
Yeah, there's a deep debate of how many glasses of wine are in one bottle.
2.
Yes. But while I enjoy that, the time leading up to that, I find to be very stressful because I have to I have to make sure everything is in order. The pickups, the drop-offs, I have to make sure I know whatever weird school things coming up that they have their hat for Dr. Seuss Day or whatever it may be. So the travel I find to be the hardest part for me because there's a lot of planning ahead for it. And then while I enjoy having that time away, I can't wait till I get back because, it sucks to be away from your family. So I struggle with that. It's kind of like an internal struggle. Like I'm having fun, but I shouldn't be. And I want to get back. And then I get back. And I'm like, oh, I want to go back away.
Yeah. Never quite happy where you are, right?
Right.
How about you, Scott? What's your biggest challenge?
My biggest challenge with that is the calls I sometimes would get from the younger kids. Because we switch off so well and everything runs so well when we're together, if I've got to go away for an extended period of time, the hardest part is when the youngest child will call up in tears. I miss you. I can't go to sleep at night. And it's just because the dynamic is thrown off a little bit. It's not that my wife isn't doing a great job. She's doing a fantastic job. But it's just the emotional piece of, because you never want to see your kids upset for any reason. But if it's, they just miss you at bedtime or something's happened at school and it's like, all right, I'm not there for it, or something happened at practice, good or bad, then it's that kind of guilty feeling. It's like, oh, I wish I could be there to help it out.
How about you, Kara? What's yours?
I mean, we alluded to this before. My biggest challenge is the compartmentalizing and, kind of leaving work at work to the extent that it's possible. But again, I'm lucky because I do have my husband there to sort of remind me like, woohoo, pay attention to this, what's going on right here, because this is going to go by so fast and you're not going to get it back. Yeah. But I really do struggle with that because for the longest time, I think maybe, Trish, you can probably relate to this, but before you had kids, everyone just expected you to be available and responsive because what else could you possibly be doing?
Absolutely. You're a single lawyer.
Yeah.
You're in the office at 7 a.m. or you're doing something wrong.
I find I find my clients are more understanding, when you do have kids because they, a lot of them do too, and they know what it's like when you go home. But for me, it's hard to kind of turn that off and sort of just accept that like on any given day, I'm probably going to be doing a subpar job at something, in my mind, but it's okay. But that's really what I think I'm struggling with now.
I'm with you. That is my biggest thing is being 100% present when I'm with my family and my daughter and my stepson when I'm there. I don't have that mastered. There are days that I do it better than others, but I think more often than not, it's a daily struggle for me. So, if you guys, the listeners here, if you have any tips for us, let us hear it. But this has been a great episode. I love how candid you guys were. Scott, super thanks for just hopping on with a half-hour notice without any hesitancy whatsoever. Kara, awesome. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thank you.
Your insight has been just great. So, and Megan too. I'm not trying to leave you out.
That's all right.
We have the
okay
same
with
life,
it.
I think, sometimes. But so anyway, if you guys like the podcast, would love to get a comment, a follow, a share, a subscribe. We really appreciate it. But make sure you join us next time on The Defense Never Rests. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.